from Gulfstream Park. A very good Tuesday, race fans. Sirius 162, XM 207, Sports Zone 999. If you're listening to Sirius XM online and at our website, stevebyk.com. You know, for those of you that have been listening for a long time, another morning here in South Florida when Casey when Case would say that it's mink coat time, that all the alpacas, all the yentas had gone to the fur vault and broken out the fur coats. I don't think there's anything Casey got a bigger kick out of than the temperature dropping, into the 40s, the occasionally even the high 30s. I can remember, the frost warnings, and he loved it. He loved seeing the women in their fur coats because it was that cold, or it was just an excuse to get the to get the coat out of the fur vault. Is that even still a thing? For those of you in northern climes, right? You can't keep the fur. You can't keep the fur in the house during the off season. I don't know if it invites moth, if the moths come at the lining or what it is, but you got to bring it, or unless that whole thing was a come on by the people that operated fur vaults, by the furriers. You don't hear that many references. Well, because there's nobody. Yeah, fur's not a thing. They're all right. They're all imitation. They're all artificial fur. But Case, I would always. It just makes me smile when I think about it. With the way Case would laugh about cold enough in Florida for the fur coats. It is. Another. I think tomorrow it's going to break. But yesterday was downright raw. Today a little better. But I walked out of the hotel yesterday, and I had to go back in and put on a sweater and long pants. I couldn't even and I'm quite comfortable in cold weather. But it's a different kind of cold. It's like the dry heat in Vegas. This is the dry cold, or a damp cold. I don't even know. I'm not sure which. But by Saturday, that's what counts, and the next couple of days is going to get nicer, and we're looking forward. I started to do more work on this card, and it's actually it's kind of a funny. It's going to be a different middle hour today, because nothing will send you down rabbit holes faster than pedigree work. Invariably. So I was doing. I received the Thorograph figures yesterday, so I had a chance. Got a chance to kind of do some overlay on the card, and I got when it came to the maiden races, I got as far as the second race, and I got as far as the first horse in the second race. Brad Cox has got a first-time starter named Sovereign Law. Almost sounds like a new TV show. This fall on NBC. Sovereign Law. This is an Into Mischief out of the Modest Dam Sun Path. And that's not hardly an indictment. her full sister, you'll recall, was really good. Bonnie South. Remember Bonnie South? Who Brad trained. And it's funny. She hasn't been gone that long, and yet it feels like, I looked at the pedigree page, and I saw Bonnie South. I said, God, it feels like it feels like 15 years ago. This is the first foal out of Sun Path, but Bonnie South, you'll remember, won graded stakes. She won the Fairgrounds Oaks, in fact, and she won the Double Dog Dare, and she was multiple Grade 1 placed. She actually had some bad luck in terms of when she was like basically a cut beneath the best in the division, but she was quite good. And bunch of Grade 1 placements. Spinster, the Alabama, the Phipps, the Personal Ensign. She was competing against the likes of Latruska, who really got good that summer. Swiss Skydiver came out of that season. So anyway, that got me looking at that family. And from the likes of, Bonnie South, I go down a couple more tiers on the tail female line, and there is none other than Chris Everett. Yes. Who, she shouldn't be a horse that time forgot, to say the least. Chris Everett. But yet, I do get the feeling, right, that she really isn't thought of as much as she probably should be. When you talk about that era and, horses from the 70s, she does. Maybe I'll ask Andy later about Chris Everett. A 10-time winner, a little under 700,000 when that meant something. The Goldenrod, the Frazette. Well, she was second in the Frazette, but she won the Goldenrod, the Demoiselle, the Acorn, the Mother Goose, the Coaching Club, a special out in Hollywood, and then she got beaten in Alabama, but then she contested the Travers. Yes, and that led us to a whole another arena, which we're going to talk about the next couple of days. That is in part today, Steve Haskin at 10 o'clock, which I think you'll enjoy. He dropped his Derby Dozen. We'll get some early thoughts too from Steve on the Rebel and Fountain of Youth. See what his thoughts are there. And I've not looked at his Derby Dozen, so it'll be fun to see what where he's got his top contenders. But what transpired in all of this to say, I was doing this pedigree work on the second race, and the second race Saturday here is really fun. George Weaver's got McCann for the Bregman family. This is a half to Valentine Candy, who was a favorite of mine with Asmussen. Nick Zito's got an interesting Golden Sense. Nick's having a good winner. Allowed for Tagermeen. Nice quality road, 650 they paid. There's all kinds of things going on. We're going to talk to Dale Romans, as promised, this hour, and we'll ask him about Quentin B., who looks to be very much a player in here, coming off he's got the benefit of a start. There's a lot of firsters in here. Lincoln's Law in this race for Phil Bauer, the Rigney homebred. That's a half to Chancer McPatrick. Yeah. And I came across an interesting stat too on Stallion Mott has got one for Pin Oak. Gilded Bandit, who's going to have to work out a trip from the outside, who's a charlatan, was a Saratoga yearling, 550. Charlatan's hitting at 14% now with his first-time starters. That number keeps increasing as the firsters come out as 3-year-olds. His 2-year-olds were not super precocious, but that number is ratcheting upwards. He's also, interestingly, 20% with, and part of this is that there hasn't been a ton of routes, but he's hitting at 20% winners under a mile. So just keep watching Charlatan, because he's one of these moving, kind of like a moving average as his horses get more and more experience and as they age. Anyway, back to the rabbit hole today. As I started to dig in, Chris Everett, and then I get to the Travers, and she finished third in that Travers. The Dual Classic winner that probably should have been a Triple Crown winner, Little Current, was second. They were both upset on a very wet track by Holding Pattern, who got very good that summer, with Mike Maselli in the irons. And we're going to talk to Mike in hour two. I'm looking forward to it. Mike Maselli, who's really underappreciated, and as riding career, and then a extended and long-running success as a trainer. But as it happens, he's got Breslau in the Tom Fool on Saturday. So I put all this together and I said, all right, I'm gonna get Maselli on. So it'll be fun. We'll hear about the 74 Travers. And he also won what was the forerunner to the Haskell as well. Because the Haskell was for older horses around that time, and then it became a 3-year-old race. But he won the Monmouth. What was it? Was it the Invitational? The Monmouth. I forget what it was called. The other revelation that came out of this, and I'm almost embarrassed to explain this or to talk about this, because as I was like digging around and pulling up various articles. I've got newspapers.com. I can use the New York Times, the Time Machine, they call it, to read old articles. I mean, I've got all kinds of access to period pieces, and that includes the New Yorker. And so all of a sudden I see a headline about Holding Pattern and the Travers upset, and I start to look at it, and I start to read it, and it was terrific. And I see that it's by GFT Ryall. GFT Ryall, and the byline did not register with me. George Francis Trafford Ryall, who frequently rode under the alias Audix Minor. And that sort of, I had a vague recollection, but with all the different period turf writers that I've read over the years, I somehow missed this. So of course I immediately started filing off to Sid Fernando, Jay Hovde, Steve Askin, John Parada. I said, how is it that I'm, to use the expression, today years old? And Ryall's stuff is fabulous. It was basically a weekly or so column in the New Yorker since the 20s into the 70s. I think he died in 1979. And Sid started to just gush about, he discovered him at age 12 and would go to the school library every week and look at the New Yorker and read his pieces. Steve Haskin, as part of his job at the Daily Telegraph, the New Yorker fact checkers would call Haskin in the DRF library at the Telegraph library. So Steve says he literally had Ryall columns read to him each week and would have to confirm and fact check items. So you're gonna hear from a little bit about George Francis Trafford Ryall, Audis Minor, from Haskin, and then probably tomorrow from Sid too. So this is why the game is so ridiculously infectious, because the minute you lose your curiosity about it and the things that you encounter, and when I talk about the horse the time forgot, well, frankly, Chris Everett feels like she qualifies to some degree. Certainly Holding Pattern does, who had a nice enough career. I mean, Chris Everett's in the Hall of Fame, and yet I don't think she's as widely appreciated as she probably should be. So, all right, this is how I was up at 3:30, and this is how I spend the mornings. This is what happens. The other thing that happened this morning, you're going to hear from Kate Hunter in a matter of minutes. And before the show started, basically an hour ago, I reached out to her yesterday, but we had Kate before it got too late in Japan. So in just a couple of minutes, Kate Hunter pre-recorded. So it's less than an hour old, our conversation with Kate. And the reason I reached for Kate is because, I got intrigued by Pyromancer, and then no sooner, was there Pyromancer on the Derby Future Wager last week, then Lucky Kid jumps up and wins the Hyacinth on Sunday. So I said, we've got to get Kate in here and hear about the two of them, as well as other potential prospects in case either or both potentially don't want to come to Derby. Pyromancer, I know, obviously is heading to the UAE Derby. Don't know immediately the Lucky Kid plans. Today's Tuesday. I mean, he won 48 hours ago. So we'll see about what's going on there. But I don't think he's not, when you hear, he's not nominated. The not nominated is really it's $6,000 right now. It's $600 before the first cutoff. Now it's $6,000. So anybody that's not nominated that jumps and bubbles to the surface, I wouldn't worry too much. But Kate, I don't want to steal thunder, but Kate's got an interesting horse that I think you want to hear about, and they're all very American for the most part, pedigreed. On the stallion side, certainly Pyromancer by Pyro, and as it happens, Lucky Kid is out of a Pyro mare. So you're going to hear Kate Hunter. After Kate, Senator to be Dale Romans. We'll talk to Dale, and he had that Jack's Promise make a successful stakes debut on Saturday right here in Hallandale Beach, and he's got an interesting couple of horses to talk about. Obviously, he's got a maiden that I just mentioned, Quentin B, and then we're gonna obviously see what he thinks about Rocky's Balboa in Saturday's Fountain of Youth. So Dale Romans. Later, Haskin and Maselli in hour 2, Andy Serling, and I hope we're going to have an update about Chicago. I've reached out to a few people. The Hawthorne situation is is very, very, very tenuous, perilous, disconcert. But let's start conversations with Kate Hunter. Joined this morning by Kate Hunter. It's morning here. It's late at night in Japan, and always a great visit when we get a chance to hear Kate's insights. Kate, good evening.
Good evening. Nice to hear from you.
You know, I thought of you, watching the results of the Hyacinth, and with Pyromancer being involved in the Derby major, and it occurred to me. I said, let's get Kate Hunter on and see how serious these Godolphin 3-year-olds are. We've still got the UAE, as they like to call it, this on the heels of Saudi Derby. Tell us about, first, let's start with Pyromancer.
Oh, Pyromancer was massive when he won the Zen Nippon Nisayushin back in December. That's the same race that Forever Young won before he launched his mostly international career. And so, it's a real good test to kind of see where a horse is. And so usually their next step is either, if they're going to stay domestic, they stay domestic, or they hop on over to Dubai. And it looks like Pyromancer's off to the UAE Derby. Unfortunately, they're changing up jockeys. I'm a big fan of Mirai Iwata, so I would have been keen to see what he could do on the global stage, especially with a horse that he has such a connection with, like Pyromancer. So far the Japanese are, for the past 4 years, 4 for 4 when it comes to UA Derby. So knock on wood, they will have a good day again.
Pyro, of course, we remember from the domestic campaign for Winchell and Steve Asmussen, and it's nice. I always enjoy seeing a horse like this bubble up to the surface, and he seemed intriguing as an option on the Kentucky Derby Future Wager, the most recent Pool 4, and it went off, I think 77 to 1 maybe. There's not just Pyromancer. There's also Lucky Kid, who won the Hyacinth the other day, and this gives a 1-2 punch to Japan and the road to Japan. Derby points. What about Lucky Kid? And then we'll talk about the prospects for either or showing up in May.
Lucky Kid ran really good. The trainer is the same trainer as Admired Daytona from last year, and so he's quite keen to come back to the Kentucky Derby. He had a very good time last year, despite the poor results. It was one of those things where once you kind of get Derby fever, it's hard to kick it. And so he's actually has another horse who's also in the UA Derby, Kei Agito. So he's really coming guns in both hands, trying to get back to the Kentucky Derby if he can, Mr. Kato. But Lucky Kid posted a wonderful upset in the Hyacinth this past weekend. I thought he ran very, very well. A mile at Tokyo is one of those races that sometimes can end up feeling a lot longer if you're end up coming a bit wide than the mile that it's listed. So it's actually not a bad test of distance, even though it's technically only a mile. Lucky Kid was also again rode by Mirai Iwata to great success. So we'll see what happens there. I think UAE, I'm not sure if Godolphin Japan, who's a pretty conservative operation here in Japan, they're not big on going overseas. If they will send 2 of their horses to Dubai, or keep one to try and claim the Fukuru Stakes in March and leave the other one to try and take it in Dubai. In the Dubai UA Derby, and then if they have a opportunity to Kentucky Derby.
Lucky Kid, we should mention too, and these are both Godolphin homebreds. This one is a discreet cat, and I guess from a technical pedigree angle here, between Pyro and Discreet Cat, they both feel kind of middle distance, but invariably with the Japanese sign of these pedigrees. And as it happened, and Lucky Kid is out of a pyro mare, happy go lucky. So there's plenty of American thumbprints on these pedigrees.
And Pyro's been very good to Godolphin here in Japan. He's been a very true blue collar, hardworking stallion over here, and he's been very successful in the dirt. So it's nice to see that some of his offspring are starting to at least appear like they're capable of going higher.
Well, and all as it happens, all of this pyro conversation will also I'll have to bring it up tomorrow with Rich Migliori. Maybe it's good that Rich couldn't join us yesterday because Rich rode pyro at near the end of his career, including in the Cigar Mile, his career finale.
I would love to know if it was as was it bad tempered as he is as a stallion, because he's one of the most dangerous stallions I've ever seen in my life.
That's interesting. And I can also, there's a few people actually we can check in with. And of course he was 7th, 8th, 9th. So he was mid, did not run badly in the Derby pyro as it happens.
He channeled most of that talent into a bad personality.
That is great.
He's one of those stallions that if they actually have to walk next to him with a club, an actual baseball bat, because he will savage you, try and just rip you to shreds. But if he sees that baseball bat, he will not do anything. He's that smart. He knows, oh, you've got the bat. Okay, I'll be a good boy. But
wow.
he has to be in eyesight.
How about that? I'll check with Scott Blasi because I can see Blasi on the shank walking pyro into various arenas over the years. We'll see what he was like as a racehorse.
See how many chunks he got taken out of him.
Well, there's plenty like that, and actually I just pulled it up. Sean Bridgmahan actually rode pyro to an 8th place finish in Big Brown's Derby. So and he was 3rd in the Travers that year too. So the pyro influence is interesting, and certainly the training methods that we've seen from the Japanese horsemen, for preparing for a classic distance gate. They seem to, bring out the best when it comes to that requirement.
Mm-hmm. I would agree.
And you know what? I'll talk to Wednesday. We'll talk to Sid too. I'll get Sid to riff.
Get a full picture of
exactly
of Pyro's past.
Well, and because he was by Pulpit. And out of a Wild Again mare. So I mean, they're it doesn't. But it's funny because I just sort of picture him. I just picture him for whatever reason. I maybe maybe it was just the near the end of the career when he ran in the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile and then the way he finished up in the Cigar Mile. I don't know. I think of him more middle distance, and maybe that's a misrepresentation.
No, I think that holds fairly true. I mean, there's not a lot of distance racing when it comes to dirt racing in Japan. Most things are, you might get a few 2,100 meter races. There's not a lot of really long distance here in Japan when it comes to the dirt. But at the same time, because it's the deep sand, it's you need a lot of stamina to be able to run on in the deep sand as well. So I would be hopeful that some of these pyro out of other kind of, other pedigreed mares might be able to go a little bit further than he was traditionally.
I gotta ask. I mean, if it doesn't appear that, and there is time, obviously, in terms of accruing some more points, especially with some of these runners contesting the UAE Derby on World Cup night. Is there another candidate further down the Japanese road that if these candidates don't come stateside, is there somebody further down the list that is eager to come?
Well, I know I think the Fukuru Stakes is going to be a pretty much make or break race for a lot of these horses. If Lucky Kid doesn't go to the UA Derby, he will, and the trainer's able to keep the ownership on board with trying to go to the Kentucky Derby. He'd like to go on to the
virtual DJ.
I would see he'd be taking on horses like Dannon Bourbon, who has been spectacular in some of his allowance wins lately. He's a really nice horse. And I know that the Connections really do want to go to the Kentucky Derby as well. So if they win that race, which I think it's completely in his bag, he broke his maiden over 18, I think. He won his last start at 18 and the Fukudu's 18. So I could see that horse walking away in daylight. And then he immediately gets the invite to the Kentucky Derby. And what better name to have loading into the starting gate of the Kentucky Derby than Dan Bourbon?
I like that. There's also coming out of the weekend, Donna Rectus, and there's a couple of others that have had some minor placings. Satono Voyage, Tamamo Frisia.
I was really hopeful for Satono Voyage, but the trainer feels he's more of a kind of a sprinter miler, and so they're going to kind of keep him at that distance going forward. Unfortunately, he's not even nominated. They decided that he wasn't.
Okay.
He wasn't on the Derby trail, though he's a very talented horse, and I expect to, if not this year, definitely next year, have him at the Breeders' Cup.
Well, if you go a little further down there, there's Itarashai.
Yep, that'll be fun for the announcers to play around with.
That Fukuro is March 28th.
Yeah, same day as the World Cup, so It's going to be a big day for the Japanese Derby hopes. So. I'll be busy on the phone trying to get everyone's flights sorted if necessary. So I'll be in Dubai that day and helping out with translating for the horsemen. So hopefully, hopefully either I'll be landing with two or I'll be traveling over with one. But I have a feeling I'll have at least one horse coming for the Kentucky Derby.
Very good, and with some UAE Derby thoughts, 6-speed. And as it happens, we talked to Jake Ballas after the most recent win, and 6-speed basically kind of controls his own destiny heading toward the Derby.
Okay.
From what we can, from what we're going to see. And speaking also of, since we've got you, let's also get your Forever Young appreciation, and nobody is appreciated Forever Young, I think, as much as you.
Oh no, absolutely not. He's been it's been a pleasure to have been able to travel around with him for the past 2 full years and going on to a third. So I was in Saudi with him because I help manage the Japanese quarantine over there every year, and I screamed like crazy for the Breeders' Cup, and I screamed like crazy again that day. Even though it was a much easier race for him in Saudi this year than it was at the Breeders' Cup. It was still it was still one of those things where I'd had a pretty bad day up to that point because the Japanese were not running well. So he was kind of our last hope, but he didn't disappoint.
Well, not only did he come through, yet again in the biggest stage, he also set up seemingly a potential confrontation for down the road with Nisos as well, because Nisos certainly acquitted himself, handsomely in that setting. But it's just amazing, Kate. Forever Young just is doing a lot. There's a few horses internationally and in Australasia, because Kaiying Rising is also winning, hearts and minds on these shores with his exploits. So it's, the world gets smaller and smaller when it comes to racing.
Yeah, I think one of the downsides in racing in general is the West often kind of looks down on the Far East on some of their racing and kind of thinking that it's lower. And I think it's only now that, obviously transportation's easier, all of, getting around's a whole lot easier. And that most of these Asian countries have, spent so much time and money investing in their infrastructure and their breeding programs, and or for when you talk about Hong Kong, since they don't breed, but, just investing and growing and bettering themselves to a degree where they are just as good, if not in some cases better than the West in which they originally started out copying. And I think, Forever Young and Kaying Rising and Romantic Warrior are just perfect examples of, what all horse racing kind of aspires to, just like, trying to create the best. And I don't think Japan ever thought that their best horse in the global stages isn't going to be a dirt horse. But based on the amount of American bloodstock they've bought over the, past 50, 60 years, it makes complete sense that we'd end up in the winner's circle of the Breeders' Cup Classic.
Kate Hunter has joined us to talk about the Japanese 3-year-olds and more, because you can't have Kate and not talk about Forever Young. Kate, looking forward, you mentioned that agenda, March 28th, not just the Fukuru and the UAE Derby, but also the Florida Derby and the Arkansas Derby. So really one of the, in a lot of ways, the biggest Saturday that lies ahead. Still 4 weeks, but
sure.
Things
and
are
I hope
coming
one
out.
day, ultimately, my goal is to try and recruit more Japanese to come over for just the regular point races in the United States. I think that having the opportunity to run in America more than once, to bring a good horse like Forever Young was, because there was talk for a little while with Forever Young about maybe to go into the bluegrass. And I've had other horses consider, usually the bluegrass they're considering, but there's other places, obviously, like also Santa Anita Derby, to consider to launch into Kentucky Derby bids. And so I'm hoping over the next 5 years to really try and find a way to find a program that works for the Japanese to try and get them over there. Because if we can get this, like your Forever Youngs, like your Dan and Bourbons, to prep in America, I think you're going to end up. We're going to end up closer to that Derby win, because we're going to take out some of that travel, some of that fatigue. That kind of hold you back by a nose and prevents you from winning.
Well, and Godolphin is actually probably a great template for that. After years of trying to access the Derby via the Carnival and through the UAE Derby, they kind of changed their approach and got closer and closer before Sovereignty put it all together. So there's a lot to be said for campaigning on these shores.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be that's going to be my future anyway. So just a fair warning to all the trainers.
Well, I love it, and I should mention with Dan and Bourbon, probably, I'm going to guess in a lot of cases the first time people have heard his name as part of this conversation. And he was a September yearling, and he's got the most American pedigree of the potential invaders, a Maxfield colt out of a Tappet mare, bred by Blue Heaven Farm. And so, Kate, as always, informative and help all the Derby files as they continue to whittle down and drill down on the potential participants by the time we get to Churchill. Always great to talk to you. Safe travels, and
thank you.
We'll connect after World Cup night.
Yep, I will. I'll. If that's the case, I'll probably be in Kentucky pretty quickly. If Dubai goes well, I'll be in Kentucky very quickly. If Bourbon does in the Fukuru what I think he's going to do, and if you want a preview of that, you're welcome to watch his previous races, because again, they're very impressive. So I might have to go back to Japan to pick him up and then come over. So either way, I'll definitely see you on the first Saturday of May.
Outstanding. Kate Hunter, everybody. And Kate, just incredible resource, the international liaison for the Japanese contingents. Kate, thanks so much. We'll talk soon.
No problem. Bye.
Kate Hunter, everybody, and just does a tremendous job, is incredibly just on top of, as you can tell. And this Denon bourbon, this is a fresh perspective. And as it happens, this is a really American pedigree, and one that some people may really appreciate, because the Dam Wild Ridge, that was a Stone Street Tappet that was just a one-time winner, but she was a daughter of Wild Gams, and one of our favorites, New Farm, and the New Jersey program of Benny Perkins. That's very cool. I love that. All right, that was Kate Hunter, and I think Dale Romans is going to join us next. And I think Dale Romans is with us, and I'll also fold in with that New Farm mention, Wild Gams, the Novaks, and Benny Perkins does such a good job with the Novak horses, and she was a hard hitter. Second Dam, I can't wait to talk about that pedigree, and I will tell you that once Kate and I wrapped up, she is very high on this Denon bourbon. So make a note, add it to your Derby lists, and of course there's a chance for a horse to move up on Derby lists on Saturday. Rocky's Balboa. Dale Romans, good morning.
Good morning, Steve.
Lots of reasons to talk to you, including Jack's Promises win on Saturday in that sprint, Bob Barron, and you guys come back with a baby in a very deep race. I've talked already this morning quite a bit about that second race on Saturday. Quentin B runs back and looks to have a big shot.
Yeah, he's a nice horse. He's a good, quick horse. Nice first time out. First here at Gulfstream Park. That is a good race, though. I mean, there's some good horses in there that haven't run, but. And
I was doing the pedigree work. I got the Thorograph info, and so I'm looking at siblings and families, and that Judmont on the rail. That Dam, she's a full sister of Bonnie South. That Brad also trained, and this is the family of Chris Everett. So that got me off into a whole. I must have spent an hour, but George Weaver has got the half to Valentine Candy in here. That horse of Todd Pletcher's next to you, Al Loud, as a tagger mean. They pay a lot for all their horses, but this one's a half to. Cook Creek. That horse Out Loud looks like a horse that wants to go long. There's all kinds of things going on here. How about the horse outside of you? Lincoln's Law is a half to Chancer McPatrick.
Yeah, it's a stellar group of horses. I mean, the only thing we got going for us is we've already run once and shown he can run a little bit. So he steps up a little bit, and those horses need a race to get going. We might be in good shape, but it's a tough race.
Well, it's funny. Mike Welsh was with me yesterday too, and it just so happens that maiden race it produced that code review. That's a serious horse, so that it feels like that race is going to be productive. And you only beaten 3 3/4 lengths for everything.
I know. Yeah, he ran a nice race. So it'll be a fun day Saturday. It's good card here at Gulfstream Park.
Very much. And let's get using Quentin B. As well as Jack's Promise. Let's talk about the Bob Barron breeding program.
Bob's got it going on in that breeding program. Promises might be the best $5,000 sire out there. I've had a bunch of them, and they all win. They all run a lot of races. They all stay sound. He's a good little sire. And Bob's got some good mares over at Windstar. Of course, they do a great job there.
this Jack's Promise. I mean, this was a nice step forward. New career. I know that you don't worry about figures too much,
No,
unless they come back strong.
that's right. I only look at them when they make me look good.
That's a running joke with you and Andy.
Yep.
Dale doesn't care about figures unless they're big ones.
Yeah, I love
but
them
talk
when they're
about
big
this.
for my horses.
Talk about this horse's development.
We always thought he was a good horse, even before he ever started. He's ended up running a bunch of times, and he's a strange horse. So he would run big, and then he'd get beat 30 lengths with no explanation. We couldn't figure it out. But he finally acts like he's put it all together. He's running 3 out of his last 4 races have been big races, and the other day, I mean, he beat a nice field of horses to get his first stakes win. And that's a good mare. That's a good mare that Bob owns. Malibu Treasure.
Malibu Treasure, a Malibu Moon.
Yeah. Yeah, he bought her. He bought her in full to breed to not this time. Sold the first baby out of her for I think $800,000 at Saratoga.
You know,
and she was a nice filly.
I want to ask you about something because I mentioned this yesterday when I was looking at his page, and I'm pulling up the mare too, because typically Malibu Moon you're going to get horses that don't mind it wet. And what's funny about him, Dale, it seems like he's an authentic horse that likes it wet, but then he also got beat badly in on Derby weekend going back to last year, and I'm wondering the times that he's won in on a wet surface, he's generally been forwardly placed. Does he not like getting mud in his face? Is that what do you think backed him out of it?
I couldn't figure him out. I don't know if that's what it is or what, but he there's 2 or 3 races on his form. I don't have it right in front of me, but he got beat 20 lengths or more for no reason, no excuse. He just it was almost like early in his life he didn't have the competitiveness, and when he thought he was beat, he just pulled himself up.
That could be.
He's gotten more competitive. Last race he gave up the lead a little bit around the turn, let him go past him, and came back and running again last weekend. So maybe he's just grown up. I told Bob all along, he said, Bob kept telling me, you got to figure him out. You got to get in his head. I said, best thing to do is just keep running him, and he'll figure it out on his own. And I think that's what he's done.
Well, it's always easier when they train themselves.
Yeah, exactly. He's a good sound horse. He's done everything right. It's just, after those clunkers we come back, think we might find something, and there's nothing going on with him. So it's just mental stuff. Yeah. And I think he's finally gotten over it, but he's won 6 races and made $300,000. It's pretty darn good for a homebred.
Well, and if you can help, this is just a nice listed stake, but if you can help, Promises Fulfilled with some nice stake wins and more black type, it actually helps. Frankly, it franks the legacy of Shackelford too.
Sure, it does. Keeps it going. I've trained Shackelford and Promises, and this is the 3rd generation on the father's side. You don't get that very often. And this is a pretty good horse. Like I said, anybody out there that wants to breed to an inexpensive sire, I'd be calling Windstar Farm right now and get the Promises Fulfilled, because he had small crops, and they all come out running. They all win races. And if he ever got a big crop, I don't know how good he'd be.
Well, as it happens, we had a conversation yesterday with Doug Goffin. I reached out to Doug to pay tribute to his father-in-law, the late Bill Riccio, and exactly that that value sire discussion kind of came up about Dialed In, and John Enos with the volatile stake winner at Turfway on Saturday, and you don't have to pay 6 figures necessarily to, or even 50, 75. There's no shortage of value sires.
There's more value out there right now than I can ever remember. People have gotten locked into 4 or 5 of the top stallions, but there's some good sires out there that you can get for not much money if you want to have a breeding program. especially if you're breeding to race and you're not worried about the commercial side of it. I think there's a lot of good value out there.
Well, and that's exactly what Doug and I ended up kind of talking about, which is the breed to race approach. For those that that aren't going to take the progeny to market, because if you don't have a pedigreed mare and a proven a record that's going to look good on a page, you're just not going to get attention through the ring. It's just evident.
Yeah, you're not going to be in book 1 or 2, that's for sure, but you're still going to have a good, valuable horse. And even if you want to be commercial and go through the sale and give it a try, if you got a pretty yearling, they'll buy them, but you can always fall back on racing. You're not stuck with a $250,000 stud fee that you got to try to recoup.
Well, the way he won this, and he won it going away. I mean, Damon's Mound didn't get away clean under Alvarado, and was making progress, but 97 buyer, and that makes him stakes quality adjacent. I mean, all you have to do is look at the field up in New York this weekend, like the Tom Fool. He wouldn't be a misfit in that group.
No, not at all. Not at all. And he made himself into a legitimate racehorse. That was a good field of horses the other day that he was running against. And like I said, the one horse did get away a little bit slow. He came running, and he still didn't make up much ground down the lane.
No, and this really is a crazy. It really is a set of crazy running lines. With a bunch of 80s, 90s buyers, and now 6 wins, but then beaten 18, beaten 19, beaten. It's like it was an all or nothing proposition, and hopefully going forward. And one thing it seems like you've learned too, Dale, you're not going to try him. I imagine anything past 6.5 or 7.
No, not right now. We're going to keep him where he is. One thing about the Promises, I was telling Bob this the other day, they train like they want to run on, but I think most of them are probably going to be sprinters like the daddy was, which is fine. There's plenty of money out there for that kind of horse.
He's also a little tactical. He can be right on the lead, or he can be right just behind the lead. Now under Rajiv, he's won 2 in a row, so pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, you go back to the Indiana race. He came from way back at running. And the race in December, it went totally opposite of what I thought would happen. I told Bob, I think he'll take back, come around, come running down the lane. He was on the lead on the inside the whole way and fought to go on and win. So, yeah, I think that just we run him, and he's figured the game out a little bit. And he's gotten more competitive, and he's gotten confidence in himself.
That sounds just like you.
Exactly. I've always had plenty of confidence.
Well, as a candidate too, we'll get to that. All right. So I imagine you got options before breaking camp here, or and he's clearly a horse that kind of thrives on work too.
Oh yeah, he likes to run. There's horses out there like it. We've gotten to the point where we don't run them as much as we used to, and I think there's some horses that just need to run more and like to run more, and so I think he's one of them.
All right, so graded, maybe something graded next.
I think we'll stay here. There's a $125,000 stake here. Then we'll worry about it later on. See if he can put another big race together. Then we point towards Derby weekend, try to run some at Churchill. But there's one more race here. I think it's Florida Derby Day around in there, and run him here and then take him home.
All right. Well, always happy when you and Bob do well. And of course, Capital District, Bob Barron, the Fountain of Youth. Let's talk about Rockies Balboa on Saturday. Seems like this is a horse that's starting to connect the dots. Broke the maiden in December, came back with a Florida bred allowance. He took advantage of the breeding. And boy, it does have kind of a Florida feel to it, out of a Hear No Evil mare, and by Gervin. And why not take a shot?
Why not? He's I know those last 2 races, they wasn't as much competition, but he's a talented horse, quality horse, and you get a good young horse, you need to give him a chance. That's a good race, though. I mean, it came up pretty salty.
And there's a lot of speed, and he hasn't gone 2 turns. Talk about that aspect first of all, and this is a track that if you're going to try first turn, 2 turns in a spot, this is probably a good track to do it.
It is. You got the short run down the stretch to the short line, but there is a ton of speed in here. But we're down on the inside, so we'll have to give him a chance leaving there and just see where he ends up. But if they outfoot him, we'll let him settle and try to come running. I think he's got enough quality about him to change up his style. He kind of had him over a barrel in the Florida bred race, and he is quick, so you don't want to take anything away from him. But if they go out there at an unrealistic pace and he's laying 4th or 5th, I wouldn't have a problem with it.
Well,
Gervin's another one of those sires we're talking about. I mean, he's up to about 25,000 something, but it's another sneaky good under the radar sire.
There's no doubt. Just pulling up. I wanted to pull up look at the figs for a second. I got to tell you, Dale, there's going to be horses that are a lot shorter price than him on Saturday, and he's run a pair of 8s on Thorograph. He ran an 8 in that maiden special at Keeneland, and he moves forward off that 8, and he's competitive here. Only Commandment, Bravaro, Chief Wallaby, they're faster. Napoleon Solo ran, a low number as well in the Champagne win. Solitude Dude, he's also going to try 2 turns. He's faster. But a step forward makes you competitive here.
I think so. And he did it under wraps. I mean, he galloped under the wire both his last 2 starts, so I'm sure he could have went a little faster. And but maybe going 2 turns makes him faster. Maybe he trains like a horse that wants to do it. So hopefully it does. Moves him up just a notch. Like you say, he's got to improve. At this time of year, the horses step forward and do improve, or they just stay the same, and you end up being what they are.
Well, this is the time to find out. You only get one go around at this with these 3-year-olds, so you might as well find out what's happening while you got a chance. And frankly, if I think back to, I got to think back to can't remember if it was it a Holy Bull or was it the Florida Derby or with the Sharp Humor? Was that the Fountain or was that the Florida Derby when Sharp Humor?
That was the Florida Derby. Him and Barbaro. Yeah, it's funny. Me and Edgar were watching it a couple of days ago up on the stand. He pulled up the replay because I was trying to tell him that we could have beat him. We almost beat him. The only one that made him go. He was telling me he had me the whole way. So we watched the race together. He might have been right, but it was still exciting.
Well, nobody finished closer to Barbaro than Sharp Humor did. That was the closest, right? That was an exciting race, and he was my first Derby starter. So Edgar was on Barbaro, and I thought we had him a couple of times. So once around the turn, we put a neck back in front of him, and then we came back down the lane on the inside of him. But Edgar said he was just clocking us. He had us all the time. Yeah, what else is he going to say? For those that want to see. You want to see Dale actually in the lead up to that Derby, to Barbaro's Derby, the Hennigan brothers, first Saturday in May, and it's probably as good a documentary on horse racing as ever done. Yep. And people are revisiting it. I run into people all the time that have run across it or watching it. That never saw it or rewatching it. It gives you a good feel for what it takes to get to the Kentucky Derby. You want to talk about a perfect storm too for them. They only started out with like eight horses as 2-year-olds, and I think 4 or 5 of them made it to the Derby, including the winner. That was just a perfect storm of everything coming together for a documentary. It's exactly right, and the Hennigans, it just all worked, and. For those of you that'll be watching it for the first time, look for me standing in the doorway of Dale's office at Palm Meadows in first Saturday in May. Yeah, John's coming down this weekend for the Fountain of Youth. So John Hennigan, talked to him yesterday. Yeah, so we're going to get out and hang out. That was a
strange thing. He showed up one day at the barn. I'd never met him, and introduced himself and said he's going to shoot this documentary. He had one little camera, and I said, I don't care. You can follow us all you want. Well, he's become one of my closest friends in the last 20 years. Stays at my house for all the derbies, and we hang out together all the time. But no, he got so friendly and comfortable. Nobody even thought it would ever be made into anything. So he got raw footage of everybody. Nobody's acting.
No, it's terrific. In fact, Dale, that occurs to me. Are the Purdy's still in the game?
No, they're not. They had a couple of horses after that, and then I think had a little health issues and were out of the game. I haven't talked to them in a long time.
No, they were lovely
people.
He was
a dentist at Own Sharp Humor up in northern New York.
They told me the most amazing story. In fact, it might have been that morning, sitting in the golf cart outside your barn, about Carson Hollow that they bred.
Yep.
Patricia Purdy, and
yep.
She as a year, she jumped through a window and before a sale, and she cut herself up, and the story I'd never heard before. I'm pretty sure it was about Carson Hollow.
Yeah, it sounds familiar. I don't remember the whole story, but you're right. There was some story there.
Well, and for those that want to see one of the all-time great races from Saratoga history, pull up that 2002 test, Carson Hollow and you. Unbelievable, Jerry Bailey and Johnny V. Who's better than you? Dale, give us some more updates and talk about a little bit. We're inching closer toward the primary.
Yeah, we're getting there. We're getting some good foundation put in place. I think the campaign will really get kicked off, started probably the end of March into next month, and we'll be spending a lot more time in Kentucky. But right now, it's all about getting the money raised and getting some people behind us, and it's all falling in place. So we got some debate coming up in April, and that'll be fun. I like to debate and argue, so that'll be a good time. But everything's going pretty well right now.
Tell everybody how to get more information and how to contribute to the campaign.
Yeah, go to DaleRomans.com. We appreciate all contributions, but also get on there and listen to what we got to say. And just want to take some common sense to Washington. Let's all start working together again. Remember, divided we fall.
Well, give us an update too. Up at Turfway, running a few.
Yeah, we're running a few. We've got some horses that we didn't bring down here, but we're not running that many though. And getting ready. The year really starts April 1st to December 1st in Kentucky. That's when we get up there in Churchill Downs, Keeneland, Kentucky Downs. There's a lot of exciting things getting ready to happen right around the corner.
Well, and I'm just looking ahead Saturday at on that card at Turfway, Classic Appeal set to start.
Classic Appeal was one of Wayne Lucas's last starters in stakes, and he's a nice horse. He's been on a little layoff, but he's coming back okay. He should run better up there. We're trying to spread him again.
Well, the winter continues, and Dale, we will see you. Well, you're running. You got one Thursday or Friday? I know I saw you had one.
Friday we got something running. We'll be running Friday, and you're in town all week. Where are you set up?
I'm always in the trainer's lounge, just up the breezeway, here each morning, and then for the races, me, I'm on the stairs and back and forth at track apron, and so we'll see you by Friday, and Quinn's Promise on Friday.
Yep. Quinn's Promise coming off a little layoff, but she'll run good too. We'll stop in and see you before you get out of here.
Excellent. Well, this is another homebred Bob Barron. This is
another promise is fulfilled.
Yep, promise is fulfilled out of a Tis Now mare, and has kept nice company. Actually, it comes back here as a 4-year-old, and she ran into some good ones last year. So
If
nice
you're
way
running
to.
a Kentucky all, if you're running Kentucky all summer, you're gonna run into some good stuff. You're gonna have some
That's
competition.
exactly right. Exactly
So-
right. Dale Romans, everybody. Romans Racing on Twitter, but also Dale Romans for Kentucky.
.com.
Yep. DaleRomans.com. There it is. Dale, I'll see you Friday.
Thanks. Talk to you later.
Got it. Dale Romans, folks. I got to slip in. Steve Haskins is going to join us, and before I do, while we were listening to Kate Hunter, I talked to Robertino Diodoro, and an interesting. I appreciate him reaching out to me yesterday. I basically hypothesized that Rob Atras was saddling Coromino opioid for Tino, but in fact, Perry Martin has sent the horse to Atras, and of course, Atras, worked for Robertino. But I kind of had assumed that because Robertino's in non-HISA jurisdictions, that he couldn't come to New York, but that's not true. He can, and in fact, he ran in Kentucky most of the last year, and he'll be back at Keeneland and Churchill. But it was Perry Martin of California Chrome fame that made this call to send Coromino, who is an interesting horse in his own right. He's I'm just looking for those PPs because I'm going to need them for Steve too. But I mean, that's a horse that has been widely campaigned. I mean, he's run everywhere. And now I'm going to have trouble finding the Gotham and the New York. Come on, here it is. This has got to be it, right? Santa Anita on Friday. Don't forget about that double carryover. There it is. All right, good. Yeah, to give you an idea, Fairgrounds, Charlestown, Ellis, Lone Star, Fonner, where he won the Bosselman, the Gus Fonner stake, romping, more Fairgrounds, Delta Mile. He's a cool horse, and yeah, I don't know how many California Chromes are actually running in the States these days, but he's made a bunch of money too. So I wanted to provide that correction. Steve Askin joins us, and I regaled Steve this morning with tales of my deep dive on the internet. Good morning.
Good morning, Steve. You've always regaling, and you're always finding all new angles, no matter where you look. Going back to a horse that won 2 grade ones that nobody ever heard of.
I just it's so typical of I'm looking at a maiden special weight and doing some pedigree work, and the next thing you know, you're digging up Chris Everett, and looking at Chris Everett's career, the 4-legged Chris Everett, you see that Travers, at the end of her 3-year-old year, and I start looking at the Travers. Then I actually watch the video, and Dave Johnson, the fresh-voiced Dave Johnson call of that Travers, and that led to.
Do I have to relive that?
And you explain why that was such an arduous Travers for you.
Well, it was an arduous summer. Let's put it that way. Being a big Darby Dan fan, having spent every one of my vacations at Darby Dan and seeing all the foals being born and stuff, and one of the foals I had fallen in love with. In fact, when he was a yearling, I took really nice photos of him. Was a young Little Current,
Mhm.
And so obviously Little Current was a horse I followed all through his career. I watched him in Maiden. He was a speedball early on, wearing blinkers, and Lou Rondinello finally took the blinkers off and turned him into Silky Sullivan. And he would come from 25 lengths out of it. And anyway, he won the Preakness and the Belmont, which by 7 lengths each one, and just gave me, unbelievable thrill. And all of a sudden was the top 3-year-old in the country. And then he goes in the Monmouth Handicap, which is the Haskell now. And I thought he couldn't lose that race, but you never know with a horse that comes from that far out of it. And he comes flying late and just gets beat a nose on the wire by Holding Pattern. And I said, oh, God. And he was like 2 lengths in front of him, but stepped past the wire. So, I mean, Holding Pattern was just like this little, I remember he was like a little light black horse who was coming from the Midwest. He had run some grass races in the Midwest. And I think he won a dirt stake at Exarban. But he comes into the Monmouth Handicap and just holds off Little Current. And it was just so disheartening for him to get beat a nose. Then they go to the Travers, and it was an absolute duplicate of the Monmouth Handicap. I mean, here comes Little Current flying from 20 lengths out of it in the slop with Chris Everett in there. And sure enough, there's a silly little Holding Pattern holding on for dear life and just holding on by a nose to beat Little Current again. And he never did anything after that. So every time I see Holding Pattern, I mean, I've gotten to appreciate him over the years because of who he was and what he accomplished. But boy, he ruined the rest of that year because Little Current, if he had won those 2 races, if he had gotten his nose in front, would have been up for Horse of the Year, and who knows, maybe even more. It would have been a heck of a Horse of the Year race between him and Forgo that year.
Yeah, 74. That's a good point. And the one thing that came out of that Derby, of course, with Little Current was the restriction of the field to 20 was born from that log jam.
That was a big field. That was a very, very big field, and it was the 100th anniversary Kentucky Derby too, and it was just crazy Derby. And the one thing about that Derby, and back then, but I really cashed a really nice ticket on Little Current. A Ray Wolf photo. I remember watching the Derby, and Little Current had no shot. Bobby Ussery was riding him for the first time and just got him stuck behind the field. He had to be 20 lengths out of it coming to the quarter pole. And Bobby Ussery had nowhere to go. I mean, it was just nothing in front of him but a mass of horses. And he takes him literally 15 wide. He was like, the widest horse was like 10 wide, and he was like another 7 or 8 paths out from the widest horse. And he comes flying late to finish 5th. And he only got beat like, maybe 4 lengths or so. And I said, if this horse runs anything like that race in the Preakness, he's going to be very tough. And this time he gets through on the rail and runs off and wins by 7 lengths. But that was a crazy, crazy Derby. Oh, my God, there were so many horses in it.
Well, there's any number of things. Mike Maselli is going to join us, Steve, after the break. Maselli,
okay.
Right? It's funny. New Yorkers, New Yorkers really of the last couple of generations, I'm sure there's a lot that don't even realize that Mike Maselli was a jockey at the level that he was. And
he was a good jockey. He was a good Midwest jockey. Rode in a lot of big races. But you can ask him what happened to him afterwards. I think he rode him a couple of more times afterwards, and he didn't. They tried him back on the grass, and he did nothing. I remember, and then he ran in some other stake and did nothing, and then he never ran again, and never heard from him again. never saw his name in the pedigrees. He just showed up long enough to ruin my year.
That's pretty funny. And there is one from the training side with that Holding Pattern. J.J. Sarner.
I'd never even heard of him either at the time.
Yeah, which is not a name. Yeah, it's not a name you. And It's a little comical that holding pattern was by Old Bag.
Yeah, yeah. He was not royally bred. Let's put it that way.
He was by Old Bag out of an all blue.
Wasn't he out of a mare by something like Old Blue or Blue something
all blue.
or something?
All blue.
What is it?
All blue.
Okay.
All blue. From the crop in 1947, and the dam was Miss Caesar.
Yeah, there you go. This blue-blooded pedigree, if I ever saw one.
Well, speaking of blue bloods, we'll shift gears and then we'll work our way to your Derby Dozen and conversation about the Fountain and the Rebel and the Gotham. Part of what transpired this morning that was a revelation. As I'm looking, I think I put a search in for 1974 Travers, wanting to see the video, wanting to see, because all the all the Travers are at YouTube. And as part of the results, I happened to see a headline, Muddy Travers by GFT Ryall, Ryall. And I click on it, and I've got a New Yorker subscription, Condé Nast, and so I've got a catch-all, and I discovered this treasure trove of GFT Ryall columns in the New Yorker, and I very quickly realized that this is somebody who basically was writing workers correspondent for racing for 50 years. And I had no idea, Steve, how I've never seen his writing until this morning.
Yeah, and it is a shame too. One of the reasons that most people, I shouldn't say most people, nobody has ever heard of him, is that I think he only went by GT Ryall, probably at the end or at some point in his career. But he basically wrote under the name Audax Minor. Back then, a lot of writers used to take these pseudonyms and use them, and handicappers did as well. But he went by the name Audax Minor, and nobody really associates the New Yorker, with horse racing, but he was a fixture there, and I know him very well because typical of the New Yorker. Every week I would get a phone call from their fact checker checking all of George Ryall's facts in his column. And they were so thorough and so meticulous. And they went over, and it's obviously the person on the phone was not a racing person, because she would ask me every minute detail you could think of. It's things that any racing person would know. Now a furlong, that's an eighth of a mile, right? I mean, everything that was in that column. So she would read me through the whole column and ask me every time he mentioned anything, any kind of a fact, she would ask me to double check it and make sure it was right. So I knew his columns very well through that, because I was the fact checker for the fact checker. And it was interesting. She would call me every single week, and every time she called, I would say, "No, there goes an hour of my time right there." Because I would have to, like I said, if I didn't know it off the top of my head, I would have to check it myself to make sure his facts were right. But I give him credit. I mean, they checked everything. You'd love to have a fact checker like that. So that's how I knew George Ryall, and it's unfortunate that most people never heard of him, because he was one of the great racing writers and covered racing, like you said, for as long as anybody. But if you go back and look at the name Audax Minor, and I forgot he took that name. I was some kind of old, I don't know, not biblical, but some kind of historical name, whatever it was, and that was George Ryall. No, New Yorker. Not many people turn to the New Yorker for racing news.
Well, he took it from the English racing writer Arthur Fitzhardinge Berkeley Portman, who would
That's gotta
sign
be an
his
old
work.
name, right?
Yep, Audax, and so that's why he called himself Audax Minor, because he was trying to emulate Portman, Berkeley Portman. It's very funny.
Well, it's funny. It's funny you should mention that. It was his name. I remember when I was writing freelance, and our editor at the Racing Forum, he did not let me write for the Racing Forum. He wanted to keep me stuck in the library all those years. And I was freelancing basically for Thoroughbred Record and Stud and Stable in Europe and a lot of different European publications, Louisiana Horse. Anyway, I was just writing freelance there, and he never even knew about it. But then the Thoroughbred Times came into existence, and Mark Simon was the editor. So I automatically, obviously, knew Mark from the Thoroughbred Record days. I started writing for them, regular features, and then wound up covering New Jersey racing for them. I would cover all of the races at Monmouth, Meadowlands, Atlantic City, and doing features, and also doing Triple Crown stuff too. But I said, you know what, if Fred Grossman, the editor, if he finds out, I don't know if he's going to let me do it. So I told Mark, I said, look, if I can't, I'm going to write under the name Ard Patrick, A-R-D Patrick, who I can't remember the year, but he was the winner of the 1842 English. In fact, when Ray Pollock came to the Thoroughbreds, he would always kid me back then. He always referred to me as Art Patrick because I was in some stranging forward to it, writing under that name, and people not knowing who it was. But it turns out he didn't care if I wrote under my name or not. But then because it was fairly common back then. People, writers would write under a different name. Not incredibly common, but some writers do it. Now, listen to all of them on there. We had Hermes and Ray Count, Gaffney. It was all kinds of names like that. So writers did the same thing. So I came very close to being Ard Patrick, not Art, Ard, A-R-D.
Well, which could have been, which could have been, it could have been short for Ardsley or some other family.
Yeah, it could have been anything. But I went back through all history to look for a name that wasn't a real name, Joe Smith or something like that, but sounded like a name. So I said, well, let me just go check the English Derby. And I went back to as far back as you can go, back to the 1800s. Good. And I saw the name Ard Patrick. I said, there you go. It's a name without a name. So that almost was me. So I understood the Audax Minor part.
Well, I will put some links out, and certainly to the obit. His obit is really really.
I'll have to read that.
I'll send it to you.
Read that.
It's absolutely fabulous. And one of the things when you said that you were one of the fact checkers that the editors would the fact checkers at New Yorker would call. I was the fact checker. That is amazing because I got to find this one little piece where they said where one of the fact checkers called and was asked a question, and the response was, the only person that would know that is George Ryle. And
so even the fact checker needed a fact checker.
Exactly right. This was the obit is October 15th, 1979. Robert McMillan wrote it, and it's a wonderful remembrance.
I'll definitely have to read it. Yeah, because I was his fact checker all through the 70s.
Amazing, amazing.
And he, like
Well,
I said, he was old. He was old then. He'd already been writing for a million years.
well, Steve, I mean, we don't talk about, frankly, we don't talk about this part of your career enough because, and this is the first time. Well, this is the first time I've ever heard you tell me this, and I've ever heard this story. And of course, I only discovered Ryle today. But you're working in the library and getting coffee for Charlie Hatton.
You remember that, huh?
Well,
that goes back to the Morning Telegraph days too. When
yes.
Oh God, Charlie Hatton. And the thing is, I mean, that's a story in itself. Charlie was such a curmudgeon, in so many different ways. But I would have to go into, because we had a cafeteria at the old Morning Telegraph. So he'd go in and he goes, hey, go in there and get me a cup of coffee, will you? There. But the thing with Charlie's coffee, and people look at Charlie like a god, and he was, but he was a person too, and a quirky one. The coffee would have to be filled to the brim. I mean, up to the top, where I don't even know how I could even carry it back to him. Filled to the top, and it had to be scalding. I mean, not hot, scalding. So I would bring him the cup of coffee, and like 15 minutes later, I would look at the coffee, and maybe he might have taken one sip out of it because it was still up to the top. He'd always go, he goes, hey, do me a favor, this coffee is getting cold. And it was just the same thing over and over again. I'd have to keep getting him coffee that would be filled to the top, scalding, and he would take one sip, and then it wasn't hot enough anymore. So I'd have to go back and get him another one.
Get him another one. I love that.
And then the funny thing is that people always talk about and they were the most brilliant things ever written. All the pieces he'd write in the manual every year, where he would describe a horse physically. So Charlie was not a backstretch person. You wouldn't find him in the barn area. I don't even know if he ever went to the press box, but yeah, he was the most brilliant writer you can imagine. So he would write about all of these horses from the physicality standpoint, and nobody knew what he was talking about. He would measure his hip to his hock, talk about how his gaskins are slightly overset from this, and his girth this, and the point of the hip to the point of the hock. And he would go over these horses so meticulously about every physical aspect of them. And I remember it was 1969. I went to the Belmont Stakes, and he was a big Majestic Prince fan because he hated Arts and Letters. And the reason he hated Arts and Letters is that he hated Elliot Birch for private reasons, which I won't get into, but it was really weird. I mean, it had to do with his daughter and Elliot. Oh my God, it was a soap opera. But he hated Elliot Birch and hated Arts and Letters and loved Majestic Prince because he was such a beautiful horse, and he was like the most beautiful horse he had seen since Man of War, and he's comparing him to Man of War. So I took that year. I went to the Belmont Stakes, and I had my little Kodak. I think I've mentioned this. My little Kodak Brownie Instamatic that would take 3.5 by 3.5, crummy photos. Sure. So I took this picture of Majestic Prince in the walking ring before the '69 Belmont Stakes, and it was a nice shot. It was just a horse walking with the rail was in front of him, and it's just a shot of him walking. And he asked me. He goes, I want to use this photo for my manual writing. I said, oh, you can tell anything about this horse from this junky little photo? So he said, yeah. So he asked me, he goes, make me up an 8x10 of this. I said, I didn't even know I was going to make an 8x10 because it was just a little 3.5-inch photo. So he says, make me an 8x10. He says, and make one for yourself. So I said, okay. So I went to a store and I made up an 8x10, and I made up one for myself. And I came back and I gave it to him, and he used that, and he never paid me for it, and I didn't say anything, and I had just mentioned it to one of the copy editors that that Charlie had never paid me back for these 2 8x10s. So I said, I don't want to say anything. He says, no, I'm going to say something to him. So he goes over to Charlie and he says, Charlie, you never paid Steve back for those 8x10s. And he goes, I thought he was treating me. I said, treating me. He says, make one up for yourself. Like, yeah, well, that's not treating. When you say, make me up one and make one up for you, it's not sound like that I was treating him for it. Anyway, but that's we're getting off course. But that was Charlie Hatton. He loved it, and he wrote this beautiful physical this physical observation of Majestic Prince that was so detailed and so beautiful, based on this one little 3.5 by 3.5 photo. So that was Charlie. I don't even know how we got into Charlie from all this.
Well, because the fact that you were doing the fact checking of Ryle,
right,
and the fact that you worked alongside Charlie,
the intricacies of my career, right?
Well, for those and for those that you hear the reference, the American Racing Manual, the annual daily racing form compendium, basically of a season, and the front section is a complete year in review, and Hatton wrote dozens of them. Evan Shipman, I think subsequently, right? Was Evan was after Hatton?
He was. They were together at one point, but by the time I got there, Evan was retired.
He was retired.
And Charlie made it through Secretariat, who was the horse that he had been dreaming of since Man of War, and he just absolutely adored Secretariat. I think he probably died like a year or two later, something like that, mid-70s.
Well, do you want to recite the poem, or should I?
Which poem was that?
Weave for the Mighty Chestnut.
Oh, you go ahead and do it.
Weave for the Mighty Chestnut, a tributary crown of autumn flowers, the brightest then when autumn leaves are brown. Hang up his bridle on the wall, his saddle on the tree, till time shall bring some racing king worthy to wear is he.
Wow, you remembered that, right? Good for you.
There's several lines when you read those racing manuals. There's so many spectacular and kind of indelible, references, and if you want to have that's why I was so excited to find Ryle, because and frankly, I'm going to want to try to see if there's a way to put all of his pieces together, even if it's online, because it would be an invaluable, basically it's a half century worth of commentary on racing, and I would that'd be invaluable.
I would love for him to, get him in that media role of honor, because he certainly deserves it. But I guarantee you, not one person on the committee ever heard of him, and I wouldn't even know how to go about trying to convince them, what an icon he was at the time. But when you talk about Charlie, I mean, two of my favorite Charlie's quotes that he wrote, both about Secretariat, was Secretariat had worked. He had this incredible work, and Charlie wrote basically describing the work. All he wrote was, "The trees swayed." that was one of my favorites. And the other one was when Secretariat won the Gotham, and he said it equaled the track record. You went a mile in like 1:33.3, winning the Gotham. And Charlie wrote that Secretariat could not have gone any faster had they thrown him off the grandstand roof. No, yeah,
Well,
I mean, nobody could write like him. But like I said, he was such a great writer. He was so beautiful and so poetic, but he was just so cantankerous.
well, that's part of the charm of those types, frankly, right?
And he used to come in, all the stuff he wrote for the manual, he used to write in the library. He would bring his old Underwood 1928 typewriter with him. They didn't even make typewriters like that anymore. But he had this old typewriter, probably like when they first invented typewriters. And he would sit in the corner, and that's where he wrote all the manual stuff. Was in the library, and did not want to disturb him. I'll tell you that.
So funny.
And when he wanted coffee, you got him. When he wanted coffee, you got him coffee.
Here, Steve. Here's the good news.
He wanted.
You're not going to have to educate the committee because Ryle is already in the roll of honor.
Oh, is he? Oh, wow! I didn't even realize that. Good for them.
Went in 2013. He went in 2013.
That's ironic. Okay, that's well. I was like, okay, it was 3 years before I did, so I wasn't even aware of that.
Well, in fact,
I guarantee you, I guarantee you, I know who got him in. Ed Bowen.
Probably that makes perfect sense. Well, and that was actually. This was quite a class. Ryle, Kent Hollingsworth, and Andy Byer. All went in 2013.
Well, that makes sense too, because Kent Hollingsworth was Ed Bowen's boss. When Kent was the editor and publisher of the Blood Horse, and Ed was the managing editor.
Well, and I'm just and the first four inductees: Red Smith, Bill Knack, Charlie Hatton, Steve Christ were the first four honored in 2010. With the then Joe Palmer, Jay Hovde, Whitney Tower. The next year, then Byer, Hollingsworth, and Ryle.
Right.
And later, not much later, 2 years later, Steve Askin, Raleigh Burrows. It's
funny that
amazing.
I got into. It's funny that I got in the same year as Raleigh Burrows, because Raleigh Burrows was the editor of Turf and Sport Digest, and that was the magazine I would go into Manhattan to find old copies of. I had no way. I never read the Blood Horse or the Thoroughbred Record. I didn't have any subscriptions, and I was just getting into horse racing, and it was the late 90s or so, and I didn't know what the heck I was doing for a living or anything. And I would go all the way into the city and go to a place on 6th Avenue off of 42nd Street called Magazines. And they had nothing but old magazines, and they'd be strewn all over the floor, but always in the right-hand corner of the store in the back, Turf and Sport Digests. And they'd be laying all over the place, laying on the floor, and I would just pick them up, bring them home, and would read them. And that was such a great magazine. It was so fan friendly. They had all kinds of contests, and they would vote for this, and they would have the Horse of the Week, and all kinds of puzzles and stories. I mean, it was a great magazine, especially for a novice racing fan like I was. It was the first magazine to have color photo on the cover.
Photography, yes. Yep.
Yeah.
Well, the General Duke, the cover with General Duke, 1957. I used that for people will see it in 4 weeks for the Florida Derby. I always use that incredible color cover from Turf and Sport Digest.
Yeah, but they'd have photos of jockeys, horses, and I remember Dr. Fager was on the cover, and I couldn't wait to read that. But I mean, they had all different. In fact, for the Blood Horse, if anybody goes back in the archives, I wrote a whole column on it was called Turf and Sport Digest Days, and I tell the whole story of the magazine and everything that was in it. My experience getting it. And Raleigh Burrows, wrote a column as the editor and everything, so I would read it. And I mean, this was even before I got a job as a copy boy at the Morning Telegraph, and I wound up going into the Hall of Fame the same year he does. I mean, how crazy is life?
I love it. Steve, let's shift gears and let's bring everybody to the current affairs portion. I saw Derby Dozen drop. That was also a motivating factor in having you visit. And we've got a very big weekend ahead. Saturday, Fountain of Youth, Gotham, Sunday, the Rebel. Some thoughts about the group going into this weekend, and then maybe an opinion or two about these three fields.
Well, thank God something's happening, because I'm tired of riding about the same horses and putting them in the same spot. And I'm just waiting for that big spark. I mean, just want that, not to say these are bad horses, but just haven't gotten that spark yet. And, I've had Paladin on top, and, I like everything I've seen about that horse. And, I had Renegade right with him, because to me, I'm hoping that they form some kind of a rivalry. They already have one, sort of. And, and Nearly, obviously, a lot of people have him number one. But I just need something. There was so many question marks, and those question marks are going to be answered this weekend. And as it turns out, to show you how big a weekend this is, I didn't even realize when I was doing my standings, but my number 5, number 6, and number 7 ranked horses are all in the Rebel, and my number 8 and number 9 ranked horse are in the Fountain of Youth. So it's make or break weekend for the Derby rankings, because I'm waiting for some of these horses to answer these questions. The biggest being Napoleon Solo. I just want to see what he does after all of this. I mean, he had a pretty nasty injury, and he's come back. Yeah, you always hope that they come back as good as they were, or sometimes even better. But his Champagne was so freaky. I've never seen a race like that where a horse ran that fast, going a flat mile at Aqueduct in a Grade 1 stake, coming off a maiden race, and goes 44 and change and 107 and change. And I know he came home really slow, but hey, listen, I remember with Skipaway used to run his opponents into the ground and come home slow, but he did the damage early on. And this horse's Brisnet early and middle pace figures were through the roof. And of course, the late one was slow, but he did it so easily. He's a big, beautiful, striding horse. So I'm saying this is the one horse who has the potential to be a freak, because what he's done so far is freakish. I just want to see it now. I want to see him. I'm glad he's going in the Fountain of Youth and didn't enter into Gotham, because as he runs into Gotham, he's going to be 1 to 10, and it wouldn't prove anything. But this, I want to see if he can rate. I want to see how he does, with the 2 turns. And I just want to see how far he can go. I mean, if he runs a big race here, then the sky's the limit with him. So I'm really looking forward to him. The other horse who I was really high on last year, and it was really disappointing on Breeders' Cup when he scratched, was Blackout Time. And I just loved everything I saw with him. I loved everything about him when he broke his man. I know it was at Ellis Park, but Ellis Park gets good maiden fields. And I just loved the way he was striding out. And he just looked like a real old-fashioned, tough, hard-knocking horse. And then he came back, threw him right into the Breeders' Futurity against Ted Nafi, and he ran with him every step of the way. In that last eighth of a mile, and got beat 2.5, 2 3/4 lengths or so, and clear of the third horse, who was Litmus Test. So I had really high hopes for him. I really thought he was going to be a really good horse, and I thought he had a big shot, to turn the tables on Ted Nafi in the Breeders' Cup. He never got a chance to, because he was a vet scratch the morning of the race. So anyway, you got him in there, and you've got now Litmus Test. I mean, he is so typical of Bob Baffert. He's, Bob had told me early in the year that he says he's my Derby horse. He says, I don't know how far the others can go. I got one Derby horse, it's Litmus Test. He says I'm putting him in bubble wrap. That was his exact words. He said, I'm putting him in bubble wrap, and we're just going to hold on. I'm going to give him two preps, and that's it. So bubble wrap. I said, all right, so what, like San Felipe and San Diego Derby? He says, yeah, you know, a lot of these trainers, they have a horse they think is a Derby horse. They don't want that horse to be exposed and ruin the dream. So he tells me that, like, not a week or two, a week and a half later, by the way, he's entered in the Southwest Stakes. So I said, well, there goes the bubble wrap. And then they postponed the race, and he's in there again. The following week, he's still in there, hasn't been scratched. So finally, I asked Bob. I said, you know, what's the deal with this race? He says, no. He says, I never intended on running him. I said, oh, okay. I don't know what he's talking about. He says, maybe the Holy Bull. I said, oh, okay. No Holy Bull. Then I asked him, I said, any plans now? He said, yeah, it looks like San Felipe. I said, okay, so we're right back where we started from in the bubble wrap. He tells me 2 days later, he's entered in the Rebel.
The Rebel.
So, so I kidded around with him. I sent him a text back. I said, okay, you got me again. You know, it's just to be expected. You know, I've known Bob for 30 years now, and he says that he doesn't. He waits to have the horses tell him. He says he goes by whoever's doing great at the time. That's who runs. And he was supposed to run Brandt in there, but he didn't like the way he worked. I said, well, he worked at 6 furlongs at 11-4. And Bob says, no, he didn't. He says, I got him working at 113. I said, well, I don't know what that's all about.
Huh.
But anyway, he didn't like the way he worked. So he's not ready. He wasn't ready for the Rebel. So at the last minute, he decided to put a litmus test in there. So we're going to find out now how he does. And, you know, even like, you know, Silent Tactic, who, you know, I love the way he's come along. He's not fast. You know, his numbers aren't that fast. But, you know, he's improving. He needs to get faster. But I like the fact that he came off of the 2 synthetic surface races at Woodbine, and he ran a huge second to Strategic Risk, and then comes back and beats him, and was very impressive, winning the Southwest. But you know, because of that, they got to rush back. So he's only coming back in 23 days. So he's going to running against a lot fresher horses, and there's some pretty good horses running in there. So I mean, those are like number 5, 6, and 7. So they got to sort themselves out to see where they belong in there. But if you're going to ask me, well, who would you bet in the race? You know, if you're looking for an overlay, a horse that might be worth a bet, it wouldn't be any of those 3, by the way. I would take a shot, as crazy it sounds, is on Class President.
Mm-hmm.
I really like that they started him at a mile, and he won going away. I like the fact that that he did that, and I like the fact that the horse that he beat came back and broke his maiden very impressively. And then they couldn't get the next race to fill, so they had to drop him back to 7 furlongs in the swale. You know me, old-fashioned, dropping back to a sprint early. Yep. I love that. Nobody does it anymore. You know, the last I remember who did that was Nyquist when he dropped him back into the San Vicente, and he won that, beating Exaggerator. Both of them came back and won. Finished first and second in the Kentucky Derby. But nobody does it anymore. Every horse used to do it, and then I've preached that out to death. So, but I like the fact, I thought he ran a really good race. He's not going to beat Solitude Dude going 7 furlongs. Solitude Dude is way too fast. And he chased him the whole way, and, you know, stayed with him and ran a respectable race, and he was running hard at the end. And I said, you know, now they're stretching him back out. I think he's going to be really sharp. You know, he's 10-1 on the morning line. I said, if I was going to bet, I would take a shot with him. You know, another horse I think is getting really good now. He doesn't win often, but this horse was very, very highly regarded when he was young. Everybody around this horse, from the time he was on the farm, I thought that this horse was, you know, was really to be very special. That was that Soldier and Diplomat. He's tough. Mm-hmm. You know, he ran Further Ado, very tough in the stretch. In the Kentucky Jockey Club, he ran with him step to step all the way down the stretch. If you watch the Southwest, he was really game. I know he couldn't hold off Silent Tactic, but he had a horse on the inside. He had Butane on the inside of him, and he had another horse, Rancho Santa Fe, coming up on the outside of him. He wouldn't let either of them pass him in the stretch. So he's tough. Again, he's got to improve speed wise, and but he drew the outside post again. But I find him kind of interesting as well. And then you got the question of Strategic Risk, who threw an absolute clunker in the Southwest. And I don't know what happened. And Mark Katze, I kept asking him, I said, anything? He said, no, he's fine. He's just one of those days. And he's running them back here. And I don't know what to expect. I mean, if he's the old Strategic Risk, if you want to throw out the Southwest and go back to the Smarty Jones and these earlier races, he can do anything here. So, I mean, it's a tough field. Kenny Peak's got another one in there, too. He just won recently. Honey's to Blame. Rancho Santa Fe is a good, solid horse. And he's had a crazy career. I don't know. He runs on the lead, coming off the lead, rallies. So it's a very deep field. And I'm curious to see what happens here. Anything can happen. So that's going to be very interesting. And then we come to the Fountain of Youth. And I got two here, number 8, number 9. Now, Commandment, I've always had ranked like around number 6, but I changed everything around this year. I wanted to throw in a couple other horses, move them up. But again, like I said, Napoleon Solo, the biggest question mark of the weekend. Is he a freak? Freak or no freak? That's what we're going to find out. Is he special or isn't he special? And we're going to find out, what Commandment can do moving up in class, running against better horses than he has been. Now, I've always liked this horse because of the fact that he runs through the wire. If you watch him, last 1/8 of a mile, he just extends his lead. You can see his stride lengthen and closer he gets to the wire, and he just keeps going, and he gallops out like 10 lengths ahead of everybody else. He's just getting started. Again, he hasn't beaten anything, so we don't know what he's going to do here coming back against better horses. And then you got surprised he's in there. I don't know if it was the owner's decision or what, but, Bill Mott running Chief Wallaby off of one maiden race in his life is not a typical Bill Mott move. But of all the maiden races I've seen, that was the classiest, the most professional. I know everybody's looking at, all these other horses that did all these great speed figures, Emerging Market and Power Shift and Canaletto. And last year we had Englishman. All these one-hit wonders. We want to see what they're going to do, but he wasn't as spectacular as them. But boy, he's good. He beat a really good horse in the Puma, who's come back and run well. I just think Chief Wallaby looks like he could be really something. Whether he's ready for here, I don't know. I really don't know. It's a tough spot to ask for a horse to come in just one prep, and plus. You got so much speed in here. Jackson Hole, a ton of speed. Jackson Hole, who's got speed breaking from the rail, and I liked his last race a lot. He's a stablemate of Class President, but he's coming back from the rail. They're going to have to send him, at least try to send him. But there's so much speed in there. You got the Solitude Dude, obviously, sprinting speed. Napoleon Solo could be faster than any of them. Rocky's Balboa is coming off of 2 big wins at 6.5 and 7 furlongs. He's got a ton of speed. So, it could be set up for a horse like Commandment, or a horse even like Chief Wallaby to at least pick up a piece of it at the end. But, got horses running back and forth. They entered Bravaro in both races.
Well, he's running in Florida.
Yeah. So I was just going to say he's a good, solid horse because they weren't going to run him in that Rebel. Safi Joseph, you thought they might run him in Rebel because Safi had entered 3 horses in there, but mostly he's supposed to scratch one of them. And so, Bravaro is coming off a good second. He could be right there too. We really don't know much about these horses. They don't run enough. These horses are strangers for the most part. You look back at old derbies, and again, I hate to keep, looking back all the time. But horses were coming to Derby having run 8, 9, 10 times in their life. They run 4 or 5 times as 3-year-olds. You knew who they were. They all ran in all the big preps, and they ran in allowance races. They most of them ran as 2-year-olds. Not, they didn't make their career debut in late February. these horses these days are just, I'm not saying they're worse or they're not good horses. They're very good horses, but they're strangers. I was reluctant, to really get too high on a horse like Justify to do something no horse had ever done before. Undefeated going into the Kentucky Derby, 3 starts, no starts at 2. The only other horse, was, Big Brown, who had 3 starts. But before that, you had to wait. And he was like 60, 70 years before a horse did that. I think you had to go back to Regret, I think. So times have changed. We've got horses, we've got horses, running, 1-2 times, 1-2 times before the big preps. And how many horses run 3 races? Look at Mage. Who heard of Mage until he broke his maiden, in late January, and his first start of his life. And then boom, Fountain of Youth, Florida Derby, wins the Kentucky Derby. So you just don't know. You don't know who these horses are. And I'm hoping
one of the things. Well, and that's one of the things that's appealing about the litmus test, and the fact that he comes in with 5 2-year-old starts, which is, and Baffert and I talked about that after the Losal Futurity. Then there's there are others. Intrepido has got 5 starts under his belt. Plutarch with Baffert too, right? Has got 6.
That's a crazy career. I mean, I watched every one of his horses' races. By the way, dirt, grass, dirt, here.
Yep.
And one race, he's got this unbelievable turn of foot where he just explodes by horses on the turn, coming from 8th with this big run. And then in the next race, he wins wire to wire. You just don't. He just does a little bit of everything. I think he's really getting good right now. And the last time I'd spoken about, again, I don't want to put names of races in there, but the fact that he did not even nominate him for the San Felipe, because he had told me that he might want to wait because he had run at least this year. So I said, well, the Wood Memorial, could be that kind of surface. Nobody runs in the New York races anymore. I said, the deeper track, he looks like he'd like a deeper track. He says, well, right now, that's a good spot for him. So the fact that he didn't nominate him, now the only thing is he missed the work. He hasn't worked since the Robert Lewis, which I'm not crazy about, but I'm still waiting to see if he works. I don't know if he's gave him a little more time off because he's waiting all the way to the Wood Memorial. So we'll see.
The Lewis was 17 days.
2 weeks. But Baffert usually works him back like a week later or so. But it was over 2 weeks. It's been over 2 weeks. So that's why I kept. I'm not questioning it. I didn't even question it when I wrote about him in there because I just wait. I'll wait. If it goes 3 weeks, I'll start wondering how come he hasn't worked or so. But the fact that it looks like he has to run in the Wood Memorial. I mean, there's no other races for him to run in. So it looks like that's where he's going to be going. I think he should love a 1 1/8 at Aqueduct on that surface.
Steve, so got to pull up. I've got to wrap up for the break. But great start to the Derby conversations. And mentioning Aqueduct, of course, the Gotham Saturday, and we'll see. A lot of these feel sprinty. But Iron Honor makes the 3-year-old debut for Chad, this Nyquist out of the Blame Mare. So a lot to
again with one start,
there.
Yeah.
Well, Rudy's got that recent maiden winner. That has had some experience, exhibition only.
Right to party. Listen, look what Rudy just pulled off in the Withers. But Talk to Me Jimmy wins by 11 lengths.
Yep.
So where'd that come from? And now he's got this horse who's coming off like a 7.5 length win.
Going around.
It's kind of interesting. And it was, Rudy's a good trainer.
You could scratch Creole Chrome. For those of you that missed Dave, I should have mentioned this earlier. Dave Grenick's piece explaining the horses that were delayed by the storm. Dave himself delayed getting down here to Florida by the storm. So we'll catch up on that before we get off the air as well. Steve, this was fabulous. A lot of fun. Thanks for indulging me.
We covered about everything, yeah.
I would say.
Every subject you can think of. So enjoy all the races. It should be an interesting weekend.
Well, we'll know a lot more, a little more definition again after this week. Let's take the break. Andy Serling is next. Mike Maselli after Andy, and we'll talk about what Mike's got going in the Tom Fool. He's seems to me that he's okay in there with Breslau coming off a nice allowance win to start the season. The veteran. He's a horse that likes to win. But we're also going to talk to Mike about that 1974 Travers and the Haskell. Back after this, we're at Gulfstream Park. It's already been a fun morning. Stay with us. Back after this.
Sirius XM Radio. Who you betting on? How about an app created specifically for horse racing? Naira Bets. We specialize in thundering hooves, fist pumping, and boosting your bankroll with robust weekly promotion and offer betting tips from actual horse racing experts. Bet all day and night nationwide. Get the action and thrill of horse racing with Naira Bets. $200 deposit match with promo Steve200. Visit NairaBets.com for details.
Horses power Virginia's economy, creating over 38,000 good, fulfilling jobs every year. Think about the farmers, the farriers, the feeders, the athletes, trainers, drivers, and jockeys, caretakers and landscapers, investors and interns, veterinarians, restaurant owners, restaurant workers, tour guides, trail guides, equine therapists, and so many more. Now that's horsepower. Virginia's economy wins with horses.
The Pennsylvania breeding program is the best program in the country. The Stallion Awards, the owner bonuses, also the restricted races and the stakes races for Pennsylvania breeds. Last year, 321 Pennsylvania breeders earned Breeders' Awards. 22 Pennsylvania breeders earned over $100,000. We have the best program in the country. Take advantage of the fantastic program that we have. Learn more at pabred.com.
Nothing compares to a horse. They inspire greatness, command respect. Because Virginia's horse industry isn't just racing and farming. It's built on the skills, labors, and passions of dedicated people working in every industry throughout our state. Horses fuel the economy, create jobs, support thousands of families, and even make dreams come true. Virginia's economy wins with horses. Find out more at virginiahorseracing.com.
Sirius XM Sports presents At the Races with Steve Byk. And horse racing, handicapping, interviews. This is At the Races with Steve Byk.
We're back, hour three, top of hour three, and Andy Serling of the New York Racing Association. Good morning.
Morning, Steve. How you doing, man?
I'm good. I think it's basically the same temperature in the Saratoga area as it is here.
It's cold down there?
Oh,
It's like 20. It's really bad here. What's it down there?
40.
40 down there is like negative 40 up here.
Exactly.
40 in Florida is a shock to the system. I agree. I think unless you've spent time down in Florida and you've been there when it gets cold, I don't think you can really understand. Just imagine if it was, summer in Saratoga. And, think of those times even at the end of the meet, sometimes Saratoga gets in the 50s. How
right.
freezing cold it is at night when you go out, right?
Well,
go ahead.
Well, that cold, that when it gets cool, like at the end of August and the first week of September, the horses, they love it. That's one of the things they love up there is.
Yeah, but there's those nights. There are some years where it'll get into the 40s late in the meet, like at night and stuff. And
Yep.
I think it's funny. I brought up a sort of a light, late fall jacket and forgot and left it here. I didn't use it last summer. It didn't really get that cold. but it can. No, I know. Yeah, I mean, I remember being down in Florida, and there would always be that week. I think this year is the second time, right? Because I think I remember Acacia going to Tampa,
Yes.
being freezing out, and
Yep.
and there's usually that week in there where you'd wear like a semi-winter coat for the track, and especially the old Gulfstream. I have no interest. I don't really, I've been in the old Gulfstream in 10 years, the new one in years, but hopefully never again. It just was like a refrigerator in there. Love the old Gulfstream, but it was cold. Yeah. No, sorry, Steve. When's it warming up?
Supposedly by Thursday, it's going to swing back. But we had a beautiful. Tina and I had a fabulous week from New Orleans to Rosemary Beach to Clearwater. But this did sort of take me by surprise. And the funny thing is, I sent home when she left on Sunday. I some of the heavy clothes that I took when I left 3 weeks ago, I actually sent home with her.
Go buy a hoodie.
Maybe. John, I will say one thing. John Parada taught me years ago. He said, "Don't ever expect Florida weather in the winter until after Valentine's Day." That generally is true. But this one,
it was always random. I don't know. I mean, I remember one winter I was down there. I remember I was staying with Andy, I think, and we were staying down in. We stayed in Miami at the Four Ambassadors, right by Brickell Key. I remember driving to University of Miami, one of them, to see a screening of some Theo Angelopoulos movie, Harvey Keitel. I forget what it's called. Really good. And it being like 45 degrees out, and I think it was late in the heat. So who knows? I don't know. Whatever.
Well, action certainly heats up on Saturday. We got this Fountain of Youth card is certainly engaging. Back in New York, the Gotham on Saturday came up really interesting. I know it's a little bit sprint oriented, but this is an intriguing group.
I don't know. If I were some of the horses in the Fountain of Youth, I might be asking myself why I didn't ship up to the Gotham, but whatever. Yeah, I mean, obviously, Iron Honor is much the worst to beat the Gotham. I would imagine he'll be a pretty big favorite. I think David made him 6-5. I guess Crown the Buckeye will take some money. Hammond got just an absolutely ridiculous ride last time. I was surprised. I thought it was Joe Bravo making that 5-wide premature move. I must have had to pay him a fee. I think he has a patent on that move, and he didn't break, etc. But obviously, if Iron Honor can run back the debut he ran or improve on it, he's probably going to win here, right?